Alrighty, this is the fourth episode of All About Lapland podcast. This is Alex from All About Lapland, and the topic of today's talk is going to be how to see the Northern Lights in Lapland. Now, many of you know that I am a total Northern Lights freak, so I can talk for hours about the Northern Lights. However, we have to start somewhere. And in this episode, we're going to go through an overview of my best tips on how to see the Northern Lights. I'm sure this topic requires several podcasts, and probably we're going to do so. But we have to start somewhere, right? So we're going to start right here and see where this takes us. And for our Facebook page subscribers, you guys can view this video live and feel free to ask questions and I will answer them as we go. And I think it's a very cool thing that we can do it in a live format, and of course others can listen to that later on all of the podcasting apps. We are everywhere under the name All About Lapland, and this will be our fourth episode already. We are only a month into podcasting and here we are, time flies. And I see we have some viewers tuning in. Hello Wing, hello Stuart, hope you're doing well. And before we discuss the whole how to and where to about the Northern Lights, let me tell you something about myself and how I got involved into the Northern Lights. Well, first of all, I started this business All About Lapland in about 2012. And this was when I got my first good DSLR camera. It was Canon 5D Mark II back then. This is Mark IV now. I have retired my Mark II and the lens that I used back then with it. And it's the fresh generation that I have over there. So I got my first camera and I thought like, yeah, I have the best gear now. I'm going to take super pictures of Northern Lights as well. And guess what? It didn't happen. My first season, winter 2012, 2013, I was miserable, not just at taking the photos of Northern Lights, but as just, seeing them. On my first night, I went to the the train depot in Rovaniemi in the middle of the city with all the lights, and I was just looking up and it's like, why am I not seeing those? Well, many days have passed since then. My first season was a big learning curve. I had to learn where should I go, when should I go, how to operate my new and expensive camera. And actually the funny thing, the first time I really got to see big Northern Lights, it was already at the end of the season in March. I actually broke my camera. What happened is that my camera somehow it got blurry. So the sensor inside, well, now there is a curtain there. The curtain opens up. Actually, I can open up that for you. So the sensor got clouded, and I've tried to wipe the sensor with my hand. And then the shutter closed and basically I've ruined the camera. So don't do like I do. If you don't know what you're doing, don't try too hard. Well, in any case, since my next season, 2013, I've handled everything perfectly. I got very lucky. Well, luck is something that you work for as well. So not only lucky, but I got good at what I do. And I've started pictures taking since. And in 2016, it was the first time when my pictures and videos were featured in the main news, in the very mainstream news. So one morning after the big Northern Lights show, I got a call from Reuters News, and they said, well, we've spotted your Northern Lights videos. Would you like us to share the videos with us? And I was like, sure. So from there, these videos went in major news outlets around the world, and since that time, I think we've cooperated on numerous times. I think it was like 12 to 15 times when my pictures were shown. My pictures and videos were shown everywhere in the world, so I'm very, very proud of that. And also a couple of years ago, I've started my own very small aurora hunting tours in Rovaniemi. And the key here is that we only go on a good night. So if there is only one good night to go in 1 week, we'll choose that night. We don't do stupid things and go on a very cloudy night and where it's snowing, because it doesn't make any sense. And speaking of that, I've also started another account which is called Aurora Hunting, and you can find the site called aurorahunting.fi, where you will find more stuff about Northern Lights that I do, some stories, some useful tips about the best places to see Northern Lights, and also there is the information about my Northern Lights tours. So you can go to aurorahunting.fi and find all the useful and good information over there. And we have lots and lots of friends joining the stream. We have Madeline from Portugal. Boa noite to Portugal. Hello, Eero. Waiting for the hurricane in Florida. Well, we are waiting for Northern Lights here in Rovaniemi. Not tonight, but in a few weeks' time. And we have Jimmy from Costa Rica and probably some other people who are just shy to comment. So, feel free to comment and to ask questions, and we will move along with our presentation. So, our viewers on YouTube and here on Facebook can also enjoy the video version of the podcast with all the pictures that I'm showing to you, and our listeners will enjoy the story that I'm telling. And quite often when there is good weather and good aurora activity, I go out to take pictures of Northern Lights, and I have accumulated lots of knowledge about the Northern Lights, which I am here to share with you. So, what causes the Northern Lights? Any ideas? I think many of you know that the answer is the sun. So our very own sun that gives us light, gives us warmth, all the energy, also gives us the Northern Lights. And that happens with the solar wind. So not only do we have photons flying through space at the speed of light, we have warmth, the radiation, and we also have what's called the solar wind. Solar winds are very tiny energetic particles that fly into space. Unlike with light, they do not travel as fast. We do not travel at 300 kilometers per second. They travel a little bit slower. Slower, I mean around 300 to 600-700 kilometers per second. So that's pretty fast. That's like going from here in Lapland, in Rovaniemi, to Helsinki in just, 2 seconds. So 1, 2, and you're in Helsinki. Estonia, Belarus, what next? Next country. So that's how fast they travel. And the speed varies depending on how big the activity is. So when the solar wind departs from the Earth, it takes on average about 3 days for the solar wind to travel from Sun to Earth. It may be as short as 2 days, or it may be as long as 4 or 5 days. That depends on how strong the solar wind is. But that's on average, it's like 3 or 4 days. And observing the sun and different events on the sun, like solar flares or different regions on the sun, with our telescopes and with our satellites, we can estimate Northern Lights within a range at about 3 to 4 days. That's the kind of the good forecast works, and up to a month with less reliable forecast, but still some kind of the forecast. And the activity of the sun varies throughout the years. We have some years when there's lots of solar flares, lots of activity on the sun's surface, and then we have some years that the activity is very low. And during the very active years, lots of solar flares erupt from the sun, bringing us fast and strong solar wind, causing more northern lights. And then during the less good years, we have less of such events. Doesn't mean that northern lights are going to stop. It means that we will have less big northern lights. We'll have some small northern lights as well. And from observing the sun through several centuries now, we have learned how to estimate the sun's activity. And what we figured out is that sun's activity cycle is about 11 years. It's measured at somewhere between 9 to 12 years, but 11 years, it's the average. So every 11 years, the cycle repeats. During the height of the cycle, there are 2 or 3 or 4 years when there is lots of activity, lots of solar spots. I think you've heard of them. Those are the dark spots on the sun. We can count those, so the more there are on the sun during any given moment, the higher the activity is. And by counting the spots, we have arrived at evaluating the solar cycles. During the height of the cycle, there might be as many as, several, even a dozen solar spots visible at one time. And during the weak years, there might be none, no solar spot at all, for months or even years. Well, maybe small ones here and then. The solar cycles themselves, they are not similar to each other. There might be some stronger years and then might be some less strong years. So the more sunspot there is, the more there are eruptions and the bigger the activity. During the past 30 or 40 years, the biggest solar cycle was cycle number 22, spanning from about 1985 to 1996. Of course, back then people didn't have digital cameras, so many of these northern lights went unnoticed. Couple of cycles further, we have just finished the cycle 24. And to my luck, when I was just starting with my northern lights hobby, the cycle was just going up. That was in 2012, 2013. Cycle 24 was interesting in this aspect that there were two tops, two peaks of the cycle in 2013 and in 2015. So it wasn't just a single year, there were a couple of years with strong activity. And I think the strong activity lasted till about 2018. And last 2 winters, particularly this winter that's just over, was the weakest in terms of northern lights activity that I have experienced. Luckily, the solar cycle is about to restart. If not restarted yet, we are starting the cycle 25 in 2020, and the sun is a little bit more active now in summer 2020 than it was last winter. So the next years are just going to be better and better with every year until in 2025 2024 to 26 we will probably reach the height of the next solar cycle. So these will be some very cool years. Of course, you can come in any year and see some northern lights. It's just their amplitude and the activity is a bit different. Within a given year, there are also some better months and maybe less good months to see northern lights. Actually, do you know how long is the northern lights season? Many people think that northern lights can only be seen in wintertime, but that's not true. Technically speaking, northern lights appear all the time. The effect is there, the mechanism is there, even in the middle of the summer. However, for us here in Lapland, our nights are very bright. We have midnight sun whole summer. And only when the night gets dark in August, that's when we can see stars again and any kind of celestial events. For example, July 2020 was the month to see the comet Neowise. And unfortunately, we could not see it here in Lapland because it's too bright at night. I mean, it's daylight, broad daylight at night. But now, today, it's the 1st of August, the first day of the month when we usually start seeing northern lights. So, starting from maybe August 15 to 20th, this is when you can spot some first northern lights of the season. I would say that these are not yet the best sightings because of still there is so much light at night that probably starting from the last few days of August, this is when we can really see them, when the nights are really dark. And scientists have long observed the activity of northern lights in different seasons, in different months, and they've arrived to conclusion that different months in different years have bigger activity or lower activity. So they found out that the first month, for example, January, is less active than the third month, than March, and consequently August is less good than September. What they have found out that September and October are the best months in autumn to see the northern lights. Then the activity goes down a little bit in December and January. In February, we have similar activity to August, and then in March and April, there is all of a sudden more activity. So, the big question is, why is that? Well, what happens in autumn and in spring is equinoxes. So, equinox means that day equals night. But what that also means is that the Earth is in a certain relations towards the sun, and this position between the sun and the Earth makes it much more easier for the solar wind, that thing that creates northern lights, to travel from sun to Earth and cause northern lights. There is a very interesting mechanism behind that, which was discovered just only 15 years ago when the scientific work on that was published. And I've tried to read this this scientific work, and I didn't understand much, but what I understood from that is that there are special kind of channels forming between the sun and the Earth that are like highways for solar wind that can travel more easily to the Earth and cause some bigger northern lights. So, speaking in terms of how to see the northern lights, the main thing is timing. And timing might mean different things. It might mean arriving during the better years, which will be 2024 to 26. It might mean arriving at the best months, which are undoubtedly September, October, March, and the beginning of April. And the timing also means being out there at the right moment. And the right moment can be basically any time it's dark. However, you might say that it's much more common to see northern lights somewhere between 9 p.m. and midnight and 1 a.m. or something like that. Having said that, I have seen northern lights as early as 5 p.m. during the very short winter days when night falls at about 5 p.m. So after that you can see northern lights. And I've seen magnificent northern lights as late as 4 a.m. That's just how that night played out. So you never know. Sometimes you have to be patient. That's the key. And I'm really thankful for all of you guys who are now online and watching the forecast with me. And we have a question from Henrik. Henrik is asking, "Hi Alex, is it also a good time to start searching or hunting for a seasonal job in Lapland for this year?" So Henrik, normally I would say to you yes. August and September, it's when the local companies start searching for their guides. And the best thing here is to be active, is to put your CV and maybe even call to any company that you will find, or any company that interests you. There are many different companies, smaller, bigger ones, so see what kind of companies or areas interest you. Having said that, we are living in the post-COVID or still COVID times, so there is an element of uncertainty related to that. We don't know what kind of season there will be. I'm very hopeful it will be a good season for local companies and they will need some workforce, they will need guides, but it might be that this season will be less good for them, so they will be not looking for as much seasonal workers as in previous years. But if you're a good guy, if you're very active, or girl, and you want to be in Lapland, I'm sure you will find a job here. I think everything depends on our motivation of what we want to do in life, isn't that? Well, going a little bit philosophic, let me have a little drink here. So timing. Timing is very important in terms of seeing northern lights. And let's go through the whole season, the whole year. And starting with the summer. Summer is the time of the midnight sun, when the sun doesn't set. And even at midnight and 1 a.m., the sun is still shining over the horizon, make it really impossible to see any stars or dark skies, as a matter of fact. And the midnight sun season continues in Lapland for about 1 or 2 months. However, the 2 months surrounding that are also very bright. So even though the sun does set for a little while, like for example now, it sets at 11 p.m., the nights are still too bright. I mean, I have only seen my first small stars tonight ago, and still the skies are very, very bright. So starting from mid-April, maybe I would say end April, the last week of April, until mid-August, it is not possible to see northern lights in Finnish Lapland or anywhere, in the vicinity of the Arctic Circle and beyond that. You might see northern lights in summer in Canada, in Alberta or Ontario, or maybe even, Central Europe if it's a very good night, but it might be like this only one night in summer, and this is because they might have dark skies in summer. We don't have dark skies. Slowly, with every day and every night, we have more darkness, about 10 minutes more with every day. So once we arrive at mid-August, the sunset will be around 9:30 p.m., something like that. After that, there'll be a couple of hours of dusk, maybe around midnight to 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. There'll be a short period of darkness. And this is when you start seeing the first northern lights. Don't get me wrong, the nights are still pretty bright if you look in the north. In the north you'll see lots of light because the sun will be really close to the horizon still. And maybe on top of that you will see the first tiny bands of northern lights. So it's a bit difficult, a bit tricky to see northern lights in August. You have to be really patient and you have to go to a really, really dark place. So there is nothing else that can, be in your way of seeing northern lights. Something like street lights. If you're lucky, it might be a stronger night. And if it's dark enough, somewhere around 1 a.m., you can see some small lights. Usually when you look at the pictures of northern lights, they are much brighter than what your eyes can see. In this video presentation of the podcast, I've tried to tune down the images to represent a little bit more of what you actually see with your own eyes. However, still, it's a bit different what you see with your own eyes and what the camera sees. And this is because of the longer exposure. The cameras need longer exposure to see in the darkness, so they capture more light. They capture more northern lights than your eyes can see at any given moment. That's how it just works. Let me have another drink here before we go into September. September is probably my favorite month to see northern lights. First of all, there is absolutely great activity in September. Even on a really, really small night with small activity, you can see something and you can take nice pictures if you are creative. And I like to think that I'm creative. And for the second reason is that it's not cold yet. So the nights are still pretty warm, like 5 to 10 degrees centigrade. And it really feels like a luxury when you go into the forest and you walk around and you don't you don't need heavy coat. You're not cold. There is no snow and no mosquitoes anymore from the summer. So it's like you can feel the warm air inside you. Well, 10 degrees centigrade might not be warm for you at night, but it is for me, certainly. So it feels like a luxury. You feel very relaxed, and you can just take awesome pics. In September, I often go to this kind of swamp areas, like on this image that I'm showing you, because you can take shapes with beautiful trees, you can play with lights, and everything looks amazing. The third reason why I like September, it's when you go to the open water. You often can capture the reflection of the northern lights in the water, bringing like this image to a new level. And even if you don't take pictures, you can see the reflection with your own eyes in the water. And I think some of the best images that I've taken were around September. And the image that I'm showing now, it's from Ylläs. It has Akaslampalo Lake in the middle of it. There is the Ylläs swing, so a free swing that you can go to. There is a big band of northern lights in the middle, and there is my friend Tony in the canoe. In the meanwhile, we have an interesting discussion here in our Facebook chat. And Gary is saying, are there northern lights in southern hemisphere? And Giannis is saying, not only in the north, only in the north. And Stuart, quite correctly, saying, yeah, Gary, they are called southern lights. So yes, indeed, you can see northern lights in the north and you can see southern lights in the south. So aurora borealis in Latin means northern lights and aurora australis means southern lights. And you can see the lights equally well right on the top in the northern hemisphere and down there in the southern hemisphere. The difference is why northern hemisphere is better. Let me show you over here. Let's go to our map. So you have so much more landmass in the north, even though that's a really creepy projection on the map. There is so much landmass for northern lights here, like Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Iceland, Scandinavia, Russia and Siberia, going back to Alaska. While when you go to the south, well, you have the southern tip of South America, which is very small. Africa, it's too far away, and there is Tasmania and New Zealand. So I know that there are many Northern Lights photographers from New Zealand, but otherwise it's just ocean. There is not much more anywhere else. Well, there's Antarctica, but it's not really, you don't really go to Antarctica every day. Not before, not even now with the COVID thing. So it's the same process, Gary, happening in the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. It's just the north is so much better because there is landmass where you can actually stand on and see the northern lights. You can go on a ship around the southern areas and you can see them from a ship or from a plane, but not necessarily from the ground, except New Zealand. However, I would say that we have much more stronger activity here on the Arctic Circle and in Scandinavia. That's why Finnish Lapland and the whole Scandinavia is just one of the top places to see northern lights. Going back to our timeline, we are still in September. Usually in September you do get at least 1 or 2 days with complete aurora storm, like when the whole sky is just lit with colors. Maybe even more than that. We might have an aurora storm when the lights are dancing all night, and a couple of, some kind of nights that are very, very okay, very good. So not storming, but still nice activity and good lights. I think that quite possible is to see northern lights around 45 degrees in the northern horizon. That's, I would call, like good northern lights. And last September we had, I think, 3 or 4 such nights when I was really happy to see them. And we have a question from Paula in Canada. So she's asking, how do you manage with the mosquitoes? She's asking, should I bring a baseball bat or a shotgun? Well, speaking about northern lights, in September there are no more mosquitoes. Well, maybe 1 or 2 around, but that's not really something that would bother you. The main mosquito season is from Juhannus, midsummer weekend, to about right now, like the first 2 weeks of August. Also, depending if you're in the city, you might not notice so many mosquitoes, but if you go in the forest, like I did a couple of days ago, to pick up cloudberries and blueberries, that's when things get difficult. What you need to bring is not a baseball bat, but many people use these kind of hats with the net that will protect your face. I don't like that. I wear a t-shirt backwards on my head, and I look like Pharaoh Ramses like that, because I don't like the net because it doesn't let me breathe. Many people prefer to use some kind of chemicals. You can buy them, of course. I also use gloves for my hands, and I wear long sleeves. So that's what you bring with you, and I hope that answer clarifies things for you. Going back to Northern Lights, in September, even if it's like a night with really small activity, you can have a nice show. So they do not always need to be that big for you to really to enjoy this. And I really enjoy these September nights out there taking pictures. Strong activity carries on into mid-October, sometimes until the 3rd or even 4th week of October. That depends on the year. In October, we have night frosts, maybe a bit of snow, still not full winter yet, so we're kind of in between seasons. Speaking about seasons, our very first episode, or was it the second one, don't remember now, was about the season in Lapland. We have 8 beautiful seasons, and in that episode of podcast, I go into detail why is that and what is the change. So make sure to go listen for that. Anyway, in October, the Northern Lights activity is still pretty good, and on many nights you can see Northern Lights as well. When we go into November, things change a little bit. First of all, we start to have snow. The coming of snow depends on the year. In 2018, we had a very bad snow situation. The snow only arrived in the last week of November. However, last year, 2019, the snow arrived as early as mid-October in parts of Lapland, and even in Rovaniemi we had first snow on the last week of October. November still can be a pretty challenging month to see Northern Lights. To be honest, I would call it the worst month. I know worst sounds negative, but we have to be honest. November sucks for Northern Lights. First of all, the good activity that we had in October, slowly it fades out. So there is no more a highway between the sun and the earth that sends us extra solar wind to dance in the skies. We only have our basic activity. And basic activity, sometimes it can create small Northern Lights, sometimes not. The second thing why November is challenging, it's because when the winter comes, we often have a very humid, very cloudy and very moist weather. So there is fresh snow snowing, sometimes rain, mostly of course it's snow. That is very good for our winter season for tourism because people can enjoy the activities, but it's not good for northern lights, this kind of humid climate. All this humidity and precipitation, they come from the Atlantic Ocean, which just swipes over Europe and goes up into the Scandinavia. And there's nothing we can do about it. We just have to hang out and wait. Usually, I can count nights with seeing any kind of northern lights, even small ones, in November with the palm of one hand. And last November 2019, I think I've only seen 2 northern lights. 2 times I've seen northern lights. And coincidentally, to see them, I've traveled very far north in Lapland, and it was pure luck that I found a place with no clouds. It was very cloudy everywhere. I found one really cool place where the clouds dissipated for a second. Well, maybe a little bit more than for a second, but for a short while, and I was able to capture northern lights. Even if you have good weather in November, even if it's clear sky, you might not see any activity at all. You might just see stars. And we actually had this kind of night in November. We went out with a couple of friends. We stayed out whole night. It was freaking cold, minus 20 degrees centigrade, and nothing, no northern lights. So that's just how it is. So I'm not saying like 100% you won't see northern lights in November. You might be the lucky one. I'm just saying that it's difficult. And maybe you have to plan for another season if northern light is the main thing for you. So that's a very good tip for anyone. When we go into December and around December, January, kind of beginning of February area, we have good but very mild activity for northern lights. So certainly better than November, but not as good as September and October. It's still quite realistic to see northern lights. However, most likely they won't be these big, beautiful northern lights that are dancing in the skies above you. Most likely it will be a small arch over the horizon, over the northern horizon. And that probably will be 9 nights out of 10 of northern lights. So not 9 nights in a row, but total of nights. Speaking of how many nights per month can you see northern lights, that depends on the year and where you are in Lapland, how north you get. So it might be every 3rd or every 4th, every 5th night in Rovaniemi, and maybe every 3rd or every 2nd night in the northern Lapland. That depends. Also, the sky has to be clear. But if you're coming in December and January, so just be realistic. You might see northern lights, but they might not be the most biggest northern lights that you can actually see. Especially if you have moonlight. So moonlight and street lights, they can kill even the smallest northern lights. I'm showing an image now, which I've taken during the full moon period. And the activity was okay. It was small activity. But this other competing light source, it just killed this small northern lights. So that's also something to take into consideration if you're coming in end November, January, December, and beginning of February. You better plan for new moon, and that will give you better chances. Still, it is indeed quite possible to see big northern lights in December and January, and I have done this several times, especially during the big northern lights years in 2015, 16, 17, 18. Every December was quite good actually, with 3 to 4 nights with big northern lights. I remember 2016 was it, or 17? We've seen huge northern lights on the Christmas night, on the 25th of December, I think, like huge. So it's still possible to see big northern lights in midwinter. Probably less likely during the slower years that we are living now. However, last December 19th, I think, I've seen the very, very big Northern Lights, and there are also quite a lot of people watching Northern Lights. They're just for free, having fun. So it is possible, but it's a little bit unpredictable to know what kind of day or night you will see the Northern Lights. It's difficult to put a number on it in terms of how big was the activity and what kind of day you will see that. Of course, the cool thing about midwinter is that there is so much snow and it looks absolutely beautiful with your naked eyes and with photos as well. And I absolutely love going to the forests, taking picture with these beautiful, beautiful snowy trees. These few images here for our video viewers are from Ullas on the same night when I went to the forest. Basically, 6 hours of shooting Northern Lights on that night. Absolutely awesome. Very cold, -20, but very, very, very awesome. And our friend Stuart is saying here, we have had some light displays in December, in January 2017 and 18, just around midnight. Was probably the best that was on the lake in Ullas. So, exactly, we are talking about the lake Akaslompolo here in Ullas. Mm-hmm. Let me load some more slides over here. All right, there we are. And a sip of water. So around February, beginning of February to mid-February and beginning of March, the activity starts to pick up, and that can be seen with bigger Northern Lights and more often Northern Lights. If you do have big Northern Lights, then the full moon doesn't really matter because you will see those in any case because they will outpower the moonlight. And speaking of that, last February there were 2 nights with full moon and amazing Northern Lights. I think February 6, 2020 was absolutely gorgeous. So in February, March, and going into beginning of April, the activity picks up dramatically. The Northern Lights rise higher into the skies above you, and you can, on some nights, you can see beautiful displays all around you. Of course, still difficult to say, to name any dates more than 3 or 4 days in advance, but it's quite likely to see Northern Lights in springtime. So here goes the tip. If you like to experience both winter and see Northern Lights, then come in February, March, and beginning of April. You will have the best of both worlds. That's my best tip. And the Northern Lights activity still carries on into beginning of April, and April as well can be a very good month for Northern Lights. Usually, when you go out into the forest in April, there is lots of snow, but the snow is already compressed. There is sunshine in the morning that melts it down, and in winter it freezes up. So you can basically go anywhere at night, and you can reach any point and take good pictures of Northern Lights. However, after mid-April, the nights are getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and at some point you arrive at the moment when the horizon still stays bright at night, and Northern Lights are just over somewhere above that over there, and with every night the light from the sun, which is below the horizon, it overpowers the night skies, and basically we arrive to the end of the season around end April. So that's the year of Northern Lights in short. The statistics clearly say that March April, September, and October are the best months for northern lights, with on average 6 days of elevated magnetic activities, while in January and December you might have only 3 days with elevated magnetic activities. Of course, you might have more than 3 days per month to see northern lights, or more than 6 days per month to see northern lights. But on average, you get 3 nights with very big activity, and probably many other nights with less good activity. So that puts us in about every third to fourth night in January and December, and maybe a little bit more often when we are speaking about March and April. Maybe even every second night. That really depends. That depends on many things like the weather. And Gary here is asking, have you seen UFOs other than satellites? Not really, Gary. I wish I would. Sometimes I'm looking at the skies, waiting for northern lights, and basically waiting for something to happen. If there are no northern lights, I think, well, maybe a spaceship will arrive, but I'm still waiting for that. Speaking of northern lights, some people report that they can also hear sounds when they see northern lights, and personally, I haven't heard them, but many people report they do. They hear this kind of pops, like I don't know, that's how they describe it, like tiny pops in the air. And there has been a study related to that, which figured out that these pops, they might be real, the sound might be real, and it usually happens in very cold winter nights, somewhere in the open areas where lots of cold air like kind of compresses, and as the solar wind basically penetrates the Earth's atmosphere, it brings some energy and some extra charge. So sometimes that cold air reacts to that charge, making these pops. Maybe there were some sounds while the northern lights were playing, however, I have not heard them. Usually when northern lights appear, I get really, really excited. I start to move around, the snow, it's very loud when you walk on it. I fiddle with my cameras, I record the video of northern lights, so I make lots of sound myself. So maybe that's why I don't I don't get to hear anything. Moving on, we are going to talk about the places to see northern lights. We already discussed the northern and the southern hemisphere. We're not going to go into some other countries like Iceland, Alaska, Canada. Suffice it to say, many people ask me which one is better, Finland or Iceland. I would say Finland is slightly better because Finland is a little bit more north than Iceland. However, speaking about central Lapland, like Rovaniemi and Iceland, basically same chance. The weather is what decides. Northern lights usually appear in this area of northern Scandinavia, so passing through Lofoten and Senja Islands, Kilpisjärvi region in Finland, so north of Sweden as well, passing through Utsjoki and Inari regions in Finland, and of course passing through the Kolle Peninsula, the northern parts of that. So this is where northern lights physically are, but very high up in the air, about 300 kilometers up in the air. Because they are so high, they can be visible a little bit more south from where they actually are. For example, Rovaniemi. On some nights, the northern lights descend more downwards, so they are physically over Rovaniemi or even central Lapland, and people down more south can see them as well. But that is generally very rare. I would say there might be 1 or 2 nights of northern lights that people can see them in southern Finland, comparing to every third or fourth night in central Lapland, and even more often here in north. So, place in addition to time, it's also a very important decision where you go. I am based in Rovaniemi and I totally love this city, and I do see a good share of Northern Lights here. Of course, if you want to see Northern Lights during a trip and that's your first priority, then I would recommend going more north from Rovaniemi. Even 200-300 kilometers can make a big difference. For example, you can go to Ylläs areas, you can go to Levi, which is a very nice place. You can go to Saariselkä. You can go to Ivalo. I've seen many good Northern Lights in Ivalo, and even more up north. Like the whole Inari region is great. Utsjoki is amazing. And my favorite place, Kilpisjärvi, although a little bit more south than Utsjoki, but just a touch, that doesn't make much difference. Kilpisjärvi is one of the most beautiful regions in whole Lapland. So, for example, if I make a Northern Lights vacation for myself, which happens sometimes, I'd probably go to Kilpisjärvi, or I would go to Ivalo, because I know some folks over there. My friend Juha from Aurora Village, shouting out to my friend. Aurora Village is actually, I think it's somewhere here, if I'm not mistaken, or here. Anyway, you can go to the whole inner region, take your pick, and of course Utsjoki and Nuorgam areas. So the more north you go, the better chances you will have on, let's call it like that, on a regular night. On a few chosen nights, you do have bigger Northern Lights more south than that. For example, if you go to Oulu area, it's less good than Rovaniemi, and Rovaniemi it's less good compared to Kittilä, and so on. So I would say that 100 kilometers does not make a big difference, but 400 kilometers, like going from Rovaniemi to Kilpisjärvi, definitely does. When there is an aurora storm, however, it doesn't really matter where you are, as long as you are around in the vicinity of the Arctic Circle, even more south than that, like to Kemi, Kuusamo, Oulu, Pudasjärvi, Suomussalmi. The Northern Lights descend so much down that basically you have them everywhere, including the north as well. So that's when it doesn't really matter. If you want to have the best of both worlds, meaning that you don't want to go to a really small village in the north, and you want to have a certain level of services around, restaurants, so then, of course, by all means, choose Rovaniemi, but keep in mind that you have to get out of the city center, preferably, to see Northern Lights. You can go to Ylläs, a really great area. They shut down the lights in winter, street lights, so it's very easy to see. Levi always works for me. Saariselkä and Ruka Kuusamo. Yeah, I think it works. It's a little bit more south than Rovaniemi, but not too far south. So Ruka has lots of nice places to visit. So then you can freely choose the places with lots of offering in terms of the hotels, in terms of activities and restaurants as well. Let me have a little sip of water here. So, if it's a night with good activity, you might see it both in Rovaniemi and as north as Utsjoki. However, you'll see a little bit different picture. What might appear as just a few faint lights over the horizon in Rovaniemi, if you would teleport yourself to Utsjoki or Kilpisjärvi, you might see a little bit better activity. Then the Northern Lights will be brighter and they will be higher in the sky from you. So that's just a fact. Of course, here in Rovaniemi you have some different interesting activities related with Northern Lights. So you have Northern Lights flight, and it has been really handy in these cloudy days, especially in the beginning of winter, but all throughout the winter, the small plane takes you above the clouds to see Northern Lights, and I've experienced this twice. I didn't have to pay for the trip because I was taking pictures for social media to help these guys out, but the ticket. It's pretty expensive. It's 440 euros per person, so might be a bit too expensive. I totally understand, but it was experience in any case. You might also choose to go to one of the igloo hotels. There are many igloo hotels in Lapland, so just go online and search for the ones you like. So my favorite ones, as I've mentioned, is the Aurora village in Ivalo. It's very far up north. I know the personnel very well. They're very friendly, so I like that place a lot. Probably will go there next September as well to take pictures of Northern Lights. Here in Rovaniemi we have Arctic Snow Hotel and Glass Igloos, which is 20-25 kilometers out of town. Great place to see Northern Lights. About 1.5 years ago, I've seen amazing Northern Lights there on February 28th, 2018, I think it was. So there are some nice hotels here in the city center, like we have Arctic Treehouse Hotel, for instance. However, be aware that here in the city area there are some city lights which might interfere a little bit with seeing the Northern Lights. You have to be more, aware of what's happening. If Northern Lights are just tiny ones over the horizon, you have to, the better option would be to go outside in a really dark area. But if you are with kids, many people ask me, we want to go on a tour and we have small kids. And I say, well, basically, guys, you have two options. Either you rent a car and you go on your own outside the town and you can end your trip whenever you like. Your kids can fall asleep in the back seat. You can return whenever you want. Or you go to one of those igloo cottages. That might be, the best thing for you. So the best idea, so everybody's happy, your kids are happy, and you might be happy as well. One of the best places to see Northern Lights in Rovaniemi area, in the city here, is of course the Arctic Museum. I think I've mentioned that already on a couple of streams as well. It's the single best place in this whole city area, right over here, where you can spot the Northern Lights. There are still some street lights over there from the motorway, but you can see basically the north very well here. And if you like more tips about the best places to see Northern Lights in Lapland and in Rovaniemi, I've written a very thorough article on our blog, aurorahunting.fi, and find this blog article called Best Places to See Northern Lights in Rovaniemi, where I explain in detail where you can go, in which season. There is even a map with all of the marked spots over here that I marked, that you can rent a car, or some of the safari companies, they go to these places like Köyryjärvi or Vikaköngas. Many activity companies go to these places, Norvajärvi, so you might join them as well. So anyway, the information is yours. You can make your own decisions. So this blog article is very thorough, containing some sample pictures from the areas and lots of advices. So next we're going to go to a few practical tips, what you need to be aware of when you're planning your nights out, considering that you've already arrived. First of all, the weather should be clear, and of course, check the weather forecast for that. In Finland, we have Finnish Meteorological Institute. I hate to say it, but these guys, they are not good at what they do, especially when it comes to Lapland. They can basically tell you which is the temperature that they have known how to guess, but they have no clue about the clouds, unfortunately. And many times I was really, really, really mad at those, because they were promising there'll be clear skies and it was cloudy, and vice versa. Sometimes they do guess it right, but many times, basically, I've lost trust into those guys. So take the weather forecast with a grain of salt, especially here in Lapland. And in the Fell area, in northern Lapland, the weather can change very quickly, and there are all kinds of microclimates, especially in Ylläs. One winter there was the whole area near Akaslompolo, near the Ylläs 1 resort, that stayed clear the whole night for some reason. I don't know. That was really, really weird. I didn't see that in other seasons, but there is always a chance. And basically, trust your eyes more than you trust the forecasts. I usually trust the Norwegian forecast a little bit more than the Finnish ones, although they are not perfect either. The Finnish forecast site, it's called the FMI, Finnish Meteorological Institute. You can also download their app. And Norwegian Meteorological Institute is called YR, so it's yr.no, yr.no, where you can find their forecast. And luckily, as Norway is such a big country over here, they also include a big chunk of Scandinavia in their forecast, including northern Finland. So you can see, you can even have an interactive forecast map that will tell you the estimated cloud level. So take that with a grain of salt, but this works a little bit better than the Finnish forecast, unfortunately. Norwegians have a little bit more money to spend on the forecast. And the good thing is that the cloud forecast also spans in time, and you can basically have an estimate of if it's cloudy or snowy. If it says it's going to be very snowy on the forecast and every city is snowy, basically means it's going to be a bad night. But if you have lots of areas with clear skies, that means you have a better chance. So Stuart on our interactive chat is saying, maybe that should be your next job, to go with all the others. Alex the weatherman. Well, it's just the thing that the meteorologists, they sit in Helsinki, and even though they have all of the equipment, they're still clueless of what's happening with the skies out here. So sometimes just looking out of the window gives you a better estimate of today's weather than some random people from Helsinki. So that's just the truth of it, unfortunately. I do not like their work ethics. I have commented on their Twitter many times that they don't do a great job. Hopefully they'll get better of it. In addition to the weather forecast, of course, you need to check the aurora forecasts. And I know you have all of your aurora apps that tell you the forecasts. You have to go to the source. All of the apps, basically, they interpret the same information that is sent from NASA, and you'll go to raw data or kind of more honest kind of forecasts on several sites. By far the best sites that I like, it's called spaceweather.com. It's an American site which not only tells you the news about northern lights, but also space weather and all kind of celestial events. In general case, for example, they tell interesting stories about superstorms as of now, as of 1st August 2020, telling about the superstorm of 1903. Usually, if there is a good chance of northern lights, they will tell you right here on the front page. So this is the place where to get news. They also have a very nice gallery, and I have been featured on their site on many occasions, which is lovely. On the left side of this site, you have all kinds of useful information about the solar activity. Granted, it's a little bit technical, and it took me a few years to understand all this. But if you spend a few months researching this information, reading the news, you might be very good at it. What they also post is the fresh image of the sun and all of the active regions that you have on the sun. And right now, for example, we have 2 regions on the sun, which not very big, not very active, but Still, it's much better than last winter when we had 0 active regions for the whole time. So usually when these regions become bigger, this is when they can create solar flares. And usually at the beginning of the solar cycle, like we are right now, the regions are very polarized, so they are either very far in the south or very far in the north here. And when the cycle grows, the activity regions, they start to go more towards the equator. That's how it goes. So you have a short forecast and short information about the solar activity here. You also have information about the solar cycles, like how many spotless days there were. For spotless days means days with less solar activity, meaning less chance of northern lights. What I also like to watch is the image of the sun. So not only do we see images of the active regions in broader spectrum here, you also see these kind of dark areas. So there are basically 2 sources of strong activities. There are the solar flares, the eruptions of the solar wind into space, and you have coronal holes. So these dark areas are like curtains opening up and letting out the solar wind fly into space. We're getting in a little bit more technical realm here, and I'm sure it's a topic for another podcast, but this is in short. Go to spaceweather.com and read the fresh news. Another great site that I use is called spaceweatherlive.com. So the first one was spaceweather without the live.com, and this one is spaceweatherlive.com. This is also a little bit more technical, but this is the source information. You have to learn how to interpret this data instead of relying on apps which are telling you like you have KP4 and what does it mean to you? It doesn't mean anything to you. It might happen, it might not happen. So here you have a notification window that tells you about the activity. If all of the indicators are green, meaning the situation is very calm and there is no activity happening at the moment. So this is kind of a very dynamic real-time tool for a particular night. This won't probably tell you the forecast for like a month ahead of you. It will tell you the forecast for next hour or next 6 hours. You have the KP index, which is the level of activity right now and what kind of level is estimated. And you also have the readings from the solar wind, and right now it's still pretty calm, but the higher these all readings are and the more red areas, red alerts you see here, the higher the activity is. Not going into more technical details of what all of the indicators means. If you find that too difficult, I know that there is a good tool that will just tell you if there are northern lights out there. And one of the good tools, it's called the Northern Lights Alert application. And it's done by a local guy here from Rovaniemi. So what this application basically does, you have to pay for it. This site actually that we're looking now at their site, nlalert.fi, it has a quote from me. I said it works like a clock, and I've indeed been testing the app for about 1 week, and I was out in September last year, and I didn't need the alert itself because I've learned when to be out in a good time. But when I was seeing the activity picking up in the sky, I would receive the alert. So I know that it worked like a charm. So for those of you who just want to enjoy your normal vacation and be in a hotel or in a cottage and have some nice time with your family, this might be the good tool. And it will just send you an SMS or give you an alert. Just go out, and you go out and don't waste the whole night out there. And there might be no reason to go if the activity is too low and if there is nothing to see out there. So this service costs 10 euros. I think it works for 3 consecutive days. It works for different kind of regions, so you have to choose the region where you are in Lapland. So basically, you will lock yourself in some area like Rovaniemi area, or Ullas Levi kind of area or Ivalo area. It doesn't work everywhere yet, but it works in the most visited parts. And you can basically you can buy the subscription either online. Here you download the app first on the App Store or Google Store, and you purchase the code online here, or you purchase the code at one of the hotels in the area, and once you insert the code, this is when you will activate it. And as soon as the lights are in the sky, the app will send you the alert. So I'm just recommending it as a good Samaritan. Feel free to use it or not use it. Feel free to use free apps or anything you like. I'm just telling you the information. So I think we had a really good chat here regarding the Northern Lights. I hope it's been informative for you guys. And if you're coming to Lapland this winter or next winter, feel free to join my tours. They're a little bit more expensive than the rest. I would say they're rather expensive, priced at 200 euros per person. So that is more expensive than other companies. Not as expensive as the flight with 440 euros for 1 hour. But there is no bullshit, you know. You stay in contact with me and I just tell you if it's a good night or not night. And I've learned to know if it is. We're not 100% there. There were some nights that my estimation was not correct, but it's usually around November when things are not playing well with the weather or with Northern Lights. So I'm becoming more and more conservative about November. All of the other months, I think I would say we have around 100% success with Northern Lights on our tours. Of course, only nature decides how many tours we have. Sometimes we might have 2 or 3 tours in the whole month, or we might have, a little bit more tours. I don't do a few per month. I don't need to make it a mass tourism product. We enjoy a small company of up to 6 people, some drinks, some snacks, and some photography together. Keep in mind that I can only bring you what's out there in the sky, so I cannot make the Northern Lights bigger. Sometimes we enjoy very small and modest Northern Lights, and sometimes we enjoy the big ones, so that depends on the night, but you will always get an honest estimate from me. And what we do that others do not usually do is that if the weather is cloudy in certain areas, we try to go to such areas that it makes sense to see Northern Lights. So looking out for these clear skies, it's the main thing with the success. Also, feel free to visit our shop, aurorashop.fi, where you can find local design items that we produce. We also have several Northern Lights items. We have postcards made out of wood, which feature some of my images, some of my best images that I have taken during my Northern Lights aurora hunting career. So the small wooden postcards, they are printed on the plywood, which is about 0.5 centimeter thick. They are a little bit heavy, but they have some really nice images, some of the best of my career. Also, we have trays like with Northern Lights, which are not my design, but still very nice design. We have flint and steel, knives, cups, all kinds of stuff that you might need for your successful night out. And we also have our very own Aurora Time tea that we enjoy with our customers out there in the wild. So that has been our Northern Lights forecast. I'm sure there will be, not forecast, podcast. I'm sure there will be many more other podcasts dedicated to Northern Lights. I've decided to do it now because literally in a couple of weeks' time we're going to start the new Northern Lights season, which I'm very excited about. I have my gear prepared, cleaned, the batteries are being charged. I'm taking care of my tripods, making sure that they work. Speaking of which, I need to order some spare parts for my tripods. and that sort of thing. And of course, you guys, our followers, will be the first to know when the Northern Lights season begins. Thank you for listening and watching. This has been Alex. Thanks a lot for joining us. Stay cool.